Hey Canada! My name is Carrie Leaders, and I am so incredibly honored that Sophie and Kylie reached out and asked if I would share my story and my experience with the Younique Foundation and the Haven Retreat. I wish so badly that I could be there with all of you guys and hug you all in person, but I have a husband in the military who is coming home very, very soon, and a brand new house that we just moved into. So I need to prepare for homecoming and get this house ready for him. But I am there in spirit, and again, I am so incredibly honored and excited to share my story with all of you. I like to preface my speech with saying that what I share is an uncomfortable topic and it may be hard for some of you to hear. If at any time during my speech you feel the need to leave the room, please feel free to do so. I'm not here to tell war stories, but there is talk of my trauma, and I want to make sure that everyone practices self-care. I want to make this talk as empowering as possible, but as with my journey, we have to first go through the darkness to see the light. My hope is that by hearing my story, you leave here feeling inspired to help others speak their truth and benefit from the Younique Foundation. Normally when I give this speech, I have a PowerPoint presentation that goes along with it, but I am not technologically savvy enough to figure out how to share my screen with you guys. So we're just going to talk about it. And I'm going to share some statistics right now that I think will surprise you a little bit. I was surprised when I first heard these. 1 in 4 girls will be sexually assaulted before the age of 18, and I am one of them. 60% of them will never speak about it. I am their voice. 98% of rapists will never spend a day behind bars. My assaulter never saw any firsthand consequences. Many survivors experience depression, self-harm, PTSD, and flashbacks, as well as substance abuse as a result of their trauma. I've experienced all of these. Now, I don't tell you all of this to make you pity me. I'm not here bearing my soul in front of all of you to bring you down either. I'm here to put a face to these statistics and be a voice that sparks a desire to make a change. I promised myself a long, long time ago that I would never be a victim, nor would I allow anyone to silence me. So here I am, raw and vulnerable, speaking my truth in hopes that it inspires others to do the same. The mission of the Younique Foundation is as follows. We hope to inspire in women who were sexually abused as children or adolescents by hosting them at a retreat where they are uplifted by each other and learn skills that can help them find individual healing. We educate parents and empower them to protect their children from sexual abuse while leading a public dialogue to bring the epidemic of abuse to life. When I joined Younique, I was at a very, very low point in my life. I didn't feel like I was contributing to my family. I was a stay-at-home mom. My husband worked really long hours being in the military, and I didn't really have any friends, and I was just very, very lost emotionally. I had no knowledge of the foundation, and I don't even think that the foundation existed publicly yet. But once I learned about it at convention in 2015, I knew that this was right where I was supposed to be. And I now know that I didn't find Younique, but Younique found me for this very reason, to tell my story and bring a face to childhood sexual abuse. When I was working on my presentation, I came across this quote from Shalane, and when I read it, I instantly got goosebumps. And she says, "When people ask, 'Who are you to think you can make a difference?' I will look them straight in the eye and ask, 'Who are you to think you can stop me?'" The Younique Foundation was founded by Derek and Shalane Maxfield in December of 2014. One of the original purposes of Younique was to fund the foundation. As many of you know, we are able to round up our purchases at checkout. I don't know how many of you know exactly where that money goes, but it helps to fund the Haven Retreat, which I will talk about a little bit later on. I had the privilege of meeting both Derek and Shalane, and I can honestly say that they are two of the most selfless people I have ever met in my entire life. The entire family are just the epitome of selflessness, I guess. I don't have a better word for that. They embody everything that this company stands for, 1,000%. After we all had lunch, we were kind of sitting in a little powwow with Shalane. There were maybe 10 of us, and she was talking about why they started the foundation. And she had said that she always felt a calling from God to serve others and help survivors, and so the foundation was always something that they wanted to start. Now, I'm not sure how many of you know this, but Younique was started, our company was started so that they could start this foundation and fund it. In their hearts, the foundation came first, and it very, very, very clearly continues to do so. I don't know how many of you were at convention this past year, but that second day of general session, when Shalane came out and everyone else, and they were talking about the foundation and having the big foundation set up there, you can see that we are truly a mission-based company. During our conversation, Shalane asked how many of us had reported our abuse. And when I looked around our little circle, I saw one hand was raised. And I immediately started crying because with my story, I tried to report my rape. I did everything that you're supposed to do, but nobody listened and no one helped me. When I first told my husband that I was going to be speaking on my experience with the foundation and telling my story, I told him that I wanted a quote that would kind of embody my journey. And we searched together via Skype for about an hour. And I kept finding, these really long, almost poems that seemed so fitting and empowering, but nothing felt right. And then I came across this very short and simple quote that says, "She needed a hero, and that's what she became." And I feel like this so perfectly embodies my journey, because I searched and I waited for someone to help me. And when no one came, I realized that I needed to help myself, and I needed to be my own hero. And that's exactly what I did and what I continue to do to this day. I was 17 years old when I was raped at a party. I didn't know him. I had met him earlier. But sorry, I should edit this out, but I'm not going to, because this is where I speak from the heart. I didn't know him, but I will never forget him. I will never forget his name. I will never forget exactly what he was wearing that night. I will never forget what his apartment looked like. I'll never forget any of that. After my assault, I woke up the next morning and I was at my friend's apartment, and I didn't remember exactly what had happened. I knew that something had happened, but I had been drinking, and so details were a little bit hazy. And that was the worst part, was knowing that this had happened, but only having bits and pieces and not feeling like I had control. I obviously didn't have control when it happened, and I still didn't have control that next morning. I immediately got in the shower and essentially rubbed my skin raw. I felt dirty, and I felt used, and I felt like I needed to crawl out of my own skin. Afterwards, I was sitting in the bathroom, and I was just feeling these feelings of disgust and self-loathing and not knowing what had happened and wondering how I was going to tell my dad that this happened to me. It was his face that kept sticking out, and I didn't know how I was going to tell him. And I looked over in the shower and I saw a razor blade. And I thought to myself, well, there's one easy way to just avoid all this pain and what's about to come. And so I called my friend whose apartment I was at. She wasn't home. And I told her what had happened. And I said, I can't do this. So goodbye. And I hung up on her. Thankfully, I grew up with her, so she knew my parents very, very well. And she had enough sense to call them. My parents made a 30-minute drive in probably 15 minutes. And I will never forget the look on my mom's face when she came through the door and saw that I was still alive. I've done a lot of things in my life that I can forgive myself for. I've made dumb choices as a teenager. I've talked back. I've, done some dumb things, as I know we all have. This is the one thing that I will never forgive myself for, was putting my parents through that. Because they didn't know if when they got there that their daughter was still going to be alive. My mom immediately, I'm going to say, scooped me up. I know she didn't really lift me up, but convinced me to come with her and go to the hospital to have a rape kit done. And she knew that my arms needed to be bandaged because I did cut myself. Thankfully not deep enough to cause any serious harm, but they needed to be looked at. When I got to the hospital, I was assigned a caseworker, and this lady kind of just breezed in and acted like this was no big deal. She asked if I was planning on reporting my rape, and I was kind of taken aback, which I'm sure is a very common question. And she ended it with, but if you do, it'll probably never go to court. He'll probably never be charged. Your name will be dragged through the mud. It will be a long, drawn-out process. It will be very emotional. And essentially listed all these reasons as to why I should not press charges. So being 17, completely bewildered, and in not a great state of mind, I said no. So because of that, I was not given a rape kit. So even if I had wanted to report my assault the next day or a week or a month later, I wouldn't have been able to. Because of the cuts and the self-mutilation, it was recommended that I be admitted to an adolescent psych ward, just on essentially like a 36-hour hold for suicide watch. And my parents agreed. And so I was transported to the hospital, and I was essentially pumped full of medications, which are a good thing, but they made me so sick. And so again, when I got to the hospital, I asked to see a doctor, and they said, okay. And so I went and saw the doctor, and she asked me why I was there, and I again said, I was raped last night, and I never got a rape kit, and I'm really scared that something is wrong or that these medications aren't going to work. Could I just please have an exam? And again, she asked if I was going to press charges, and I said, no, I don't think so at this time, and was told again that because of that, I would not receive a rape kit. So again, I felt very alone and very confused and almost like no one was willing to help me. So after I got out of the hospital, I didn't really do anything. I didn't really deal with the assault. It was one of those things where it just kind of got pushed to the back of my mind, and I just kind of carried on with my life as normal. And I ended up getting into a very emotionally abusive relationship that lasted for about a year and a half and definitely did not help my recovery. But I always felt like I was okay. It was just one of those things where it was just not, I guess, something that I ever wanted to deal with because it's a tough thing to deal with, obviously. So fast forward to this past year, and I have a great life. I really do. I've been married for 7 years. I have a gorgeous 6-year-old son. We have built a wonderful life together. But this was always something that was kind of in the back of my mind, that was always there, and that I knew that I would eventually have to deal with. And so when I first heard about the retreat at convention last year, I knew that I needed to be there. I immediately applied and waited to hear from them. And I kind of honestly forgot about it. I knew that I would eventually get to go. But it wasn't at the forefront of my mind. I got my email last February telling me that I was chosen to attend in April. And I immediately registered. I got my plane ticket, everything squared away, and I was very excited to go. But the night before I was set to leave for Utah, the rock settled in my stomach. And it was around midnight, and I needed to be up to leave for the airport in 3 hours. I could not rid myself of the anxiety and the worry that had crept in. I was honestly terrified that I would get there and they would tell me that my story wasn't bad enough and that I should have given my spot to someone else who had it worse than me. And this is pretty typical behavior from survivors from what I've read. Looking back now in a rational state of mind, I realize how insane that sounds. And when I got to the retreat and I told the therapist that, she kind of smiled a little bit and she said, "That's what every single person says to me." At that moment, 3 hours before I needed to wake up, my anxiety kicked in, and it decided to remind me of a note that was tucked away under a pile of photos in a box in a bin in the very back room of my parents' house. This was a note that I had written immediately following my rape, and I had kept it to read when I needed validation that this happened to me. I always struggled with feeling like this was actually something that did happen to me. So having this reminder, as painful as it was very important to me. When I went to grab it, there were 2 photos lying on top of it. One was from when I was 18, and it's this photo right here. I had no photos immediately following my rape because, like I said, I was in a very emotionally abusive relationship. And so everything from that time in my life, he was in those photos. And when we broke up, I burned them all. And so I had this photo, and another was of my wedding day. They were 2 completely unrelated photos that had no business being next to each other at all. Yet they showed me at 2 points in my life. The lowest and the highest. I'm sure you can figure out which one is which, obviously, too. I grabbed the letter and the 2 photos and I threw them in my suitcase. And I wasn't sure what purpose they would serve, but I wanted them there with me in case I was suddenly inspired to do something. The next 4 days at the retreat were a whirlwind of healing, laughter, tears, and bonding. I'll never forget how all 21 of us, yes, we were the biggest group to attend, first met at the airport, and none of us would really look at each other. We kind of stayed in our little bubbles and would suspiciously kind of size each other up. But after the 4 days, as we were in the airport preparing to say goodbye, we were hugging. We were somehow crying, although I don't know how I had any tears left. And we were traveling in a pack. We were seriously inseparable. Anytime, if one of us went to the bathroom, we all went. We traveled in this pack with our rolling suitcases. Upon arriving at the retreat, we were greeted by our team of case managers and therapists and instructed to choose a journal and a blanket from the table. I'm sure many of you donated journals in 2015 and then made blankets then and this past year, and this is where they ended up. They became tools for us to release some of the pain we carried through expressive writing, and the blankets became something to cuddle with when we needed a little bit of shelter. We painted, we hiked, and we ate food prepared by a team of incredible chefs. Everything was made with all natural ingredients and from scratch. To say that we were spoiled is an understatement. We were also pampered with a hair and makeup team and then with a one-on-one photo shoot. We did yoga in the mornings and Muay Thai in the afternoon. We got massages at night while listening to live music and enjoyed million-dollar views of the mountains during our morning coffee. While there were many fun activities, there was also a lot of rawness and healing happening. Group therapy would sometimes get a little too intense, and some of the classes were sometimes too much to handle, but we banded together and pushed through the hard times. I don't share a lot of details about the retreat because for me, and I know the girls that I attended with, it's a very sacred event. But I will say that it was one of the most life-changing weekends of my entire life. And I am so thankful to be afforded the opportunity to attend. In closing, because I know that this is getting a little long, I want to tell you one last story. And it's about that piece of paper that I talked about earlier in this photo of my 18-year-old self. I knew that I brought them for a reason, but I didn't know what the reason was until the day before we were supposed to leave. And we had just finished Muay Thai and our last session of group therapy, which was pretty intense. And so I was feeling very emotionally drained, but I was also feeling very, very empowered and excited to take these tools home and really dive into my healing journey. I asked the girls that just happened to be around me if they would come with me down to the stream and just share this experience with me. I wasn't really sure what I needed to do, but I just figured that it would come to me when I got there, and it did. We were all sitting around in a little circle, and I just said, I feel like I need to share my story because, again, I struggle a lot with validation. And so they let me share my story, and I had the piece of paper, and I said, I think I'm ready to let this part go. And I'm ready to let this girl go because this girl still is inside me, and she's really broken, and she doesn't know how she's going to ever be okay again. And it's time to let her go. And so my plan was to rip up the paper and rip up this photo and send them down the stream. And one of the girls, who's become one of my very best friends now, said to me, I think you should rip up the paper, but don't rip up the photo. Keep it as a reminder to fight for this girl and to keep fighting for her every single day. And that's exactly what I did. I took the piece of paper. I took photos of it on my phone just in case I needed it again. But I took the piece of paper and I ripped it up page by page, all 6 pages, into tiny little pieces. And I let it go down the river. And I said goodbye to that part of my life. And I cried, the hardest I've ever cried, for a solid 5 minutes. And it was then and there, at that house in Utah, surrounded by the mountains, that I was finally able to start healing. And for that reason, I will forever be thankful for this company and the Haven Retreat and Derek and Shalane and everyone around me, those women at the retreat who made it all possible. So, thank you guys so much for listening. I know this got a little long. I'm a talker. But I hope that my story inspired you guys to either speak your truths or to help someone speak theirs. I always say this, that I am always here to listen, to help guide you to the application process for the retreat, or just be a shoulder to lean on if you need it. So please feel free to send me a message. I am always available, and I hope that this inspired you guys to go out and to be a voice and to use this platform for something amazing. Thank you again. I love you guys, and I hope to see you all soon. Bye.